Welcome to FSM News, where free speech cuts through the spin. I'm your host, David Fite, and tonight we've got a lineup wilder than a government cover-up at a comedy club. We'll unpack Trump's latest JFK file drop, spoiler, still a redaction party, plus the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database getting axed faster than a bad sitcom, and the band of superheroes out there saving that data and more. But first, we're hitting the ground running. We've got the Department of Education's demise, a political roast in D.C., Cuomo's cringe comeback attempt, protests over a detention in Massachusetts, and influencers all up in Epstein's dirty laundry. Part 1. Maybe. But starting out on a high note for all you Ron Swansons out there, Trump is swinging the budgeting axe and the Department of Education is the first to get detention, maybe permanently. As of March 25, it's lights out, with states now on the hook for schools. Critics say this is chaos waiting to happen. Imagine 50 states arguing over crayons and standardized tests. Supporters call it freedom from federal meddling. Either way, Linda McMahon is going to be relieved of her duties faster than a WWE rookie facing Vince. No shade, she's still a champ in our book, and the DOE has been proven to be, let's say, less than effective for quite some time. This season of Real Housewives of DC is off to a great start, and this time Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is in hot water after calling Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who uses a wheelchair, Governor Hot Wheels. And in typical U.S. politics fashion, the entire country changed their opinion on a topic overnight. You have Democrats defending the mocking of people with disabilities, while the people who voted for this guy are clamoring about decorum. Andrew Cuomo is tossing his hat in the ring for New York City mayor because nothing screams fresh start like a guy ousted for groping scandals. This is the same genius who hid thousands of nursing home COVID deaths to polish his image, leaving families in the dark while he cashed in on a book deal. Sexual assault claims from 11 women sank his governorship, and now he's banking on New York's short memory, which is an unfortunately safe bet. In Somerville, Massachusetts, protests are erupting over the detention of Ramisa Ozturk, a Turkish immigrant and activist. She was nabbed by ICE on March 20th for allegedly overstaying her visa, but supporters say it's retaliation for her outspoken criticism of U.S. immigration policies. Locals are rallying, calling it a free speech crackdown, and another case of the government silencing dissident. Wrapping up our rapid rundown, influencers on X snagged part 1 of the Epstein files this week and staged a photo shoot with binders about child rape. Classy, right? Turns out it's more redacted than a CIA Christmas list, and in many cases with less new dirt than what was already public. Now the White House is burying this PR mess faster than the Epstein client list itself. Next up, we're peeling back the layers on a files release that actually did happen, the JFK docs, because nothing says transparency like 60 years of black ink. But first, we've got a massive thank you for our sponsors. These legends are the backbone of FSM News. Without their incredible support, we'd be whispering in the dark instead of shining a light on truth. So give them some love as we head to the break to hear from a few of them right now.
Is your Shroom all-in-one grow bag. It comes vacuum sealed to preserve freshness. Your grow bag contains our proprietary substrate blend of millet, cocoa coir, vermiculite, gypsum, worm castings, and crushed oyster shells. The bag also features our unique 0.2 micron filter strips, your fortress against bacteria and mold that still lets your mushrooms breathe. You'll mark your varietal, the date you inoculated it, and then later as the mycelium colonizes, you'll mix the mycelium throughout the bag and then date the day you mixed it. This is your alcohol wipe. You're gonna use this to sanitize your injection port when you inoculate your grow bag. It's as simple as inject, wait, and harvest. And the hardest part is the wait.
Welcome back to FSM News, where free speech doesn't play by the government's rules. Tonight, we're diving into a story that's been simmering for over 60 years. The latest drop of the JFK assassination files, released by the National Archives on March 18th. If you thought this case was closed, think again. These papers are raising more questions than answers, and the government has got some explaining to do. Let's set the scene. November 22nd, 1963, Dallas. President John F. Kennedy is assassinated. And then the Warren Commission tells us Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. One man, one rifle, case closed. But these almost 80,000 newly released pages that we saw over the last week are raising eyebrows higher than a conspiracy theorist in a book depository. Let's unpack what's got everyone buzzing. First off, the FBI was playing spy games straight out of a Cold War thriller. A 1966 file shows they set up a closed-circuit TV system to watch someone tied to the case. We're talking a fancy camera with zoom, pan, tilt, all hidden in special disguises, feeding to a 17-inch monitor so agents could adjust everything. Focus, light, you name it. Marked secret, with a CIA approval needed to even peek at the memo. Who were they watching? They're not saying. But if Oswald was the lone wolf, why the cloak and dagger after the fact? Then there's a 1966 letter from German journalist Johann Jostin, sent from Milan to the Swiss Federal Police, sounding alarms. He wrote, "The final accounting with the Johnson gang is imminent. Each of you who continues to partake in the actions of the Johnson gang or their German officials, the Gehlen gang, or those who disrupt the plans of the American patriots against the usurper regime will shortly pay with their lives." The CIA flagged this as a threat, rushing into the White House and Secret Service. The Johnson gang? You mean like President Lyndon B. Johnson? And the Gehlen gang? As in Reinhard Gehlen, the Nazi-turned-CIA asset? This letter is screaming conspiracy, louder than a siren in a library. And the CIA wasn't sitting idle either. These files show they were watching Oswald like a hawk, tracking his visits to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City in '63. They even used UV visible chemical markings on phones to monitor him. Creepy, right? One file confirms Oswald called a KGB officer, but the Soviets later said he was too erratic to be their agent. So if Oswald was a lone wolf, why was the CIA so obsessed with him weeks before the assassination? And speaking of the CIA, let's talk about James Angleton, their counterintelligence chief, who was basically moonlighting for the FBI. In a '67 file, it shows that he was codenamed Bureau Informant 100, funneling intel to the feds, sometimes on stuff he wouldn't even tell his own agency. Files suggest his sources included a liaison with Israeli intelligence, possibly feeding him info on U.S. citizens traveling to Russia by '65. And why does this matter? Because Oswald defected to the Soviets in '59. These files show the CIA was tracking people just like him before and after Kennedy's deaths. Oh, and get this. A '61 memo from a JFK advisor, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., reveals Kennedy's deep mistrust for the CIA after the Bay of Pigs, warning their covert agents were acting like a state within a state. This is plenty of time for a grudge, don't you think? This lone wolf story has more holes in it than a Dallas street after a parade. But here's where it gets messy. This transparency drop accidentally leaked over 400 social security numbers of living people, including former investigators now threatening to sue. Meanwhile, 2/3 of the promised files are still missing, including 2,400 new FBI records they just discovered. Trump's team is bragging no redactions, but some pages are still blacked out. If Oswald acted alone, why hide anything 60 years later? The government's still hiding behind national security excuses, but 60 years later, that's wearing thinner than Oswald's alibi. They've locked away these secrets so long you'd think they're guarding the recipe for eternal youth, except all we're getting is more wrinkles of doubt. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low as ex-users are tearing into the release with hashtag JFK files, demanding answers, while advocacy groups keep suing for the rest. But here's the light in this fog. Groups like the Mary Fennell Foundation are fighting for every page, and folks online are piecing it together one unredacted line at a time. The government can redact, but they can't silence a public that's awake. While some files are being released, others are getting torched, and we'll fill you on that right after this. FSM News was brought to you by Blood of Tyrants, the official spirit of 1776, and by Shroom, growing mushrooms now radically simple, and by the Free Thought Project, and of course, viewers like you. Thank you. Welcome back to FSM News, where free speech cuts through the noise. Next, we're diving into a Trump administration move that's got transparency advocates fuming and bad cops breathing a sigh of relief. Brought to you from the desk of Matt Agarist over at Police the Police. Buckle up, folks. This is the Blue Line Breakdown. The National Law Enforcement Accountability Database, or NLED for short, is dead. Kaput. Shut down by Trump's team faster than you can say optics. This was a tool meant to track police misconduct across federal agencies, stopping problem officers from hopping jobs like some kind of law enforcement musical chairs. And now, it's gone, leaving us all a little less safe. While many conservatives were right to reject the woke policies of the left, which often prioritized letting criminals walk free over actual justice, removing transparency and accountability from those who claim to serve and protect is not the answer. If anything, history has shown that when the government is allowed to hide its own crimes, it will only commit more of them. Here's the backstory. The NLED was initially proposed by Trump himself in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd sparked nationwide protest against police brutality. However, the database wasn't actually created until 2022 under a Biden executive order, which sought to centralize and track disciplinary records of federal law enforcement officers. By the end of 23, all 90 federal agencies with LEO personnel had submitted thousands of records dating back to 2017. The idea was simple. Stop gypsy cops. Those officers who get caught, say, beating someone senseless, then quietly slide to another agency with a clean slate. Departments could vet applicants, dodge the rotten apples. But now, according to the Department of Justice, user agencies can no longer query or add data to the NLED. The website's a ghost town. The links are deleted, transparency's toast. Trump's excuse? He's blaming the woke crowd. The White House says, and I quote, "The Biden order was full of anti-police concepts like equitable policing and addressing systemic racism. They claim that scraping it gives cops the tools to catch criminals. Just not the ones in blue." Let's be clear, the problem wasn't the database. It was the toothless social justice rhetoric surrounding it. Yes, the left's obsession with making everything about systemic racism has led to some disastrous policies, like letting criminals roam free. But scraping an entire system designed to keep corrupt officers from re-entering law enforcement doesn't make Americans safer. It actually does the exact opposite. Police misconduct isn't some fairy tale made up by the left. Just last month, the entire Hansville, Alabama Police Department got sidelined after a grand jury uncovered a cesspool of corruption, starting with the dispatcher's drug overdose inside the station, then officers trashing evidence like it's confetti. Then there's the Houston captain Darrell Blake Edwards, who was arrested for allegedly assaulting a 6th grade girl up to 100 times, hiding cameras in her room. Without this database, creeps like him could just job hop undetected. Thomas Apt from the University of Maryland's Violence Reduction Center nails it. Everyone, cops and communities alike, have an interest in keeping officers with history of serious misconduct from rejoining the profession. This isn't partisan, it's common sense. But Trump's move says political points trump political safety and justice. His administration believes that removing transparency helps law enforcement do their jobs, when in reality, it doesn't. The White House is calling this backing the blue, but we know that's an illusion. For years, police unions have fought tooth and nail against accountability. Now they've won big. So while Trump supporters cheer on the destruction of a woke database, they fail to see the bigger picture. The state is consolidating its power by ensuring its enforcers remain unchecked and above the law. And that never ends well for the people. What's next? These fired cops will haunt your streets like ghosts and badges. Without this system in place, police abuse is set to climb. Fired officers will slip into new roles, and we won't know until the damage is done. Americans, especially conservatives, need to recognize that blindly supporting law enforcement without demanding accountability is dangerous. The same government that wants unchecked policing is the same government that will come for your rights when it suits them. And without transparency, there's nothing stopping them. We all remember what these same officers enforced just a few years ago with lockdowns and mandates. When the state can hide its own crimes, it will only commit more of them. And that's exactly what Trump just ensured. Trump rescinded this on day one, ensuring the state's enforcers stay above the law. That's Blue Line Breakdown on FSM News. Stick around after the break for more truth, less spin, and a bit of a silver lining on this one.
We have been scammed. We have been robbed, not just of our money, but of our freedom and of our power. It was taken by a small handful of narcissistic psychopaths. And it's time to take it back. But we've got to turn the power back on. We do best when we are most free. It's time to fight for that freedom. It's time to end the lesser evil scam. It's time to beat these monsters at their own rigged game. In the past 2 years, I've been blessed to travel across America, meet tens of thousands of incredible people, feed the less fortunate, hold corrupt governments accountable, train candidates and activists, and work with anyone who's willing to fight. And at every turn, I heard the same thing over and over. They're worried about COVID-19, the mandates, healthcare, housing, education, the future that they're leaving behind for their children. They were worried because things just keep getting worse. But when I met them where they were, showed them we cared, and explained to them the causes, effects, and solutions to get us out of this mess, I saw something change in their eyes. I saw hope. We have the solutions. We just need to live them out and invite everyone else to join. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to be leaders and solve problems in our communities. We're going to make headlines and get the kind of attention that spreads our message. We're going to build a culture of winning, getting candidates elected like never before. We're going to empower our neighbors to join us in this fight. We're going to win the public debate and change the culture. We're going to awaken the sleeping giant. We are going to set the world free. When we realize our power, no one can stop us. 2 years ago, this journey began. The next step begins right now with you. I'm Spike Cohen. You are the power, and together, we're about to change everything.
FSM News was brought to you by Blood of Tyrants, the official spirit of 1776, and by Shroom, growing mushrooms now radically simple, and by the Free Thought Project, and of course, viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome back to FSM News. No filters, just facts. And a little fun. Like we mentioned in our NLED story, Trump's administration is torching federal data like it's a bonfire. Tonight, we're spotlighting the Internet Archive stepping up to save what's left. This is a digital David versus Goliath showdown you won't want to miss. Since Trump took office, his team has been slashing federal oversight. The DHS parole purge, the NLED shutdown, you name it. Some of those cuts make sense if you're a fan of small government. But here's the rub. They're also memory holding decades of public data. Climate studies, health records, historical archives, poof, gone. The White House is calling this streamlining, but it's a blackout, plain and simple. Cue the Internet Archive, a nonprofit that's been saving the web one page at a time. They've been at this for years, about as long as I've been alive, but now they're stepping it up big, preserving government data that's getting wiped out. We're talking EPA reports, NIH studies, the works. That's a ton of info snatched from the government shredders. And this isn't just about dusty old reports. It's your right to know. That climate data could show what's really happening to our planet, not what some suit or activist wants you to think. Those health records might expose some hard truths about pandemics and their policy. And historical archives, they're the backbone of holding power accountable, something the NLED fight taught us in short supply. Trump's team isn't just cleaning house, they're gagging your voice. The Internet Archive is fighting back, but they're a small crew, about 150 folks fighting against a federal machine with billions. They've lost some ground. Parts of the Census Bureau archives are gone for good. Just last week, the Department of Energy's renewable energy reports vanished. It's a tough gig, but they're not alone. The irony is thick on this one. Trump says he's all about freedom, but torching data is a page right from 1984. The archive work isn't just a tech win, it's a free speech lifeline, backed by ex-volunteers mirroring sites before they vanish. One user said they saved 10 years of USDA data and made them feel like a digital Indiana Jones. And that's the spirit keeping truth alive. Now here's where you come in. The Internet Archive needs us. They're running on donations, battling a government that can memory hole entire databases overnight. So head on over to archive.org, toss them a few bucks, or join in the fight. Because if we don't save the truth, it's game over. Like we mentioned earlier, the government can delete, but they can't stop a public that's awake. That's FSM News this week, where free speech cuts through the spin. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week for more unfiltered truth.